want to
Is
make
this on
clear,
now?
there's a picture
know.
of me and Sigrid,
I hope
they're
not.
about 1 and 2. That's the
Kissing.
last time I
Kissing.
kissed them. I
Yeah,
want you to
right.
Well, there's one of Mike and
Is it on
I,
now, or-
both,
Oh,
you know, when you're a boy in a family where the mothers want girls, and,
Right.
your mother dressed you up in more frills and you had a little bear, we must have been 4 years old. I'm in a dressy type thing. You got a physical dress on, but I got a lot of lace on me.
This explains a lot about Michael.
And I think we were required to hold hands. That's probably just to stand up.
I don't remember what.
Once
they told me.
again,
I
the
never
same
did.
problem you have today.
I never did what they told me
Linda's got the
anyway.
picture of that now.
Life comes full circle.
Yeah.
But wait a minute, before we go too far,
I think you're gonna toast
we would,
the pen.
well, we're
You
gonna
don't have
toast the missing cousins, and we miss them.
You got more mimosas?
Yeah.
I
It's
agree.
really too bad. The oldest and the youngest, as it turned out, are gone.
That's
Sig
right.
and Bobby, to you.
Here,
This
here.
is dedicated to you.
Here, here.
And
Oh, we'll have to do it again.
And
that does not mean
Actually,
you
Sig.
are above a little zinger now and then.
Well, no, that's true.
There's two.
We may have some stories about them,
Oh,
but
yeah. Oh, yeah.
they probably can remember things better than I can now at this stage in their life.
We're gonna hope for intervention there.
Yes.
Do you want to?
Okay,
Oh,
First of all,
here's the one I'm talking
Are
about.
they
Oh,
taping?
yeah.
Are you taping?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay.
I haven't seen that picture.
I can see why, you probably burnt it.
Look where my hand is on that dolly though.
And your other hand is holding mine, I think.
Yeah,
You're
Yeah,
what?
we guys are good.
Bam.
I think that's the
You
Easter
got a little
parade.
boy doll?
Whatever you
That
want
might
to
be
go
the
with.
Easter parade. I'll go
We call
to,
those action
one of my
figures.
favorite memories of the Aanestads and the Edmunds is when we went next door in Crookston and broke all the neighbors' storm windows.
That was right, Frank?
Yeah.
That was correct. Rice Lake, that was Rice Lake.
Rice Lake.
That was Rice
And we threw bricks
Mr.
through there.
Peterson
Yeah,
had
and lined up a couple of them so we could one brick through most of them.
Yeah, yeah.
There was some
They thought
idea,
they'd never know who did that.
but the idea that somebody didn't participate is BS. I think all four through.
Yeah.
And then, I remember it.
It was clear sailing by the time John and I got to that age.
Well, that was the same,
Except
that was
we
the
were-
same
They
back
they
then.
knew we couldn't be as bad.
We were accused of breaking Mr. Peterson, who lived next door, breaking his thing.
His
And his thing.
His
That
thing.
was broke
And
Peterson's
John,
thing.
as they're yelling at us.
What
for
did his
breaking-
wife say?
It was a trellis that had vines on it, it was really pretty.
Oh.
Okay.
And allegedly, we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And all of a sudden, they started scolding us and saying, "You broke Mr. Peterson's thing." Well, John and I were both going,
Just couldn't keep it together. And
they
we were
and they had no idea why we were
I was
laughing.
5, he was 7. And still.
But that was in your back bedroom, they had built-in cabinets. And the three youngest, we could cram you in there, and it had a latch on it. We'd put a pin on there, and
You couldn't get out.
if you get claustrophobic or something, leave them there for 20 minutes and go back and bail them out, let them go breathe again. But it was
Strange
this
a lot,
small.
Was that on the first floor?
Well, I thought you had a tick for a couple of days that went away before we left.
That was before Lyme
Was
disease.
that on the first floor? Because we can
Yes.
only be on the first floor in the summer. In the winter, you had to go upstairs because that was the only part of the house that was heated.
But
And
then
we're all
this
just
is
one big.
the time period I'm
Oh, yeah, we
talking
didn't
about
eat up here this
is
winter.
Ole got laid off from some job.
Ole got
He
laid?
came up to mom's bedroom there.
No, no,
That
we didn't.
was
Yeah,
much
how late was
earlier,
that?
We slept
much
downstairs.
earlier.
Much earlier,
Oh, so
okay.
it was the wrong season.
But the old man got laid off from some
No wonder he
job.
was so cold.
Whatever you want.
Too bad.
And so,
Don't interrupt.
my dad got
When he
laid
talks,
off.
everybody has to be quiet.
Yeah, really.
Because he'll lose
I
the subject.
appreciate you telling them that, so they don't get.
Don't change
So-
the subject.
Mr. Interlocutor.
We have
There
a
was
buzzer so we can say,
a
yes, we've heard
serious
this one.
conversation, and all of Sig and I, and I'm not sure where, some person, he didn't pay any attention, but what were mom and dad gonna do when the old man was laid off? The conclusion was, we're gonna celebrate and drive 300 miles to Crookston to be with the Edmunds. And part of that.
Maybe we can sell kids there.
But all those trips, whether it was Crookston, Rice Lake, or a couple of, that the partying started with them about 6 o'clock in the evening and went till 6 in the morning.
Yeah, yeah. They
And
play
we
cards
were-
through the night.
Or, and among,
Was it just
or
the-
the Elks Club or something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
It was only the 4 of them then? Bonnie, Ole, Maureen, and
when
Fritz?
the two families got together.
Okay.
But when they were in Minneapolis, Sig and Mill would
Yeah.
play.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you ever hear the
And
story?
Joe and Dorothy.
In the early times, what we're at 3925 3rd Avenue, there's pictures of them now. I think you got one of them playing cards. And somewhere along the line, my mother started telling the story of my dad when he was 16 years old, had one of helping this guy who got supposedly shot in a hunting accident, find a doctor in North Minneapolis who wouldn't talk because if this guy's wife ever found out that his buddy said they'd never let him go hunting again. So the old man slowly led him through the back alley to this doctor who quote took out the bullet. But it was a .38 slug. These guys had robbed a bank, and that they're explaining this, or my mother and dad, at one of the party of 6 poker games, at which time Mildred hushed the whole crowd and said, "Holy, your father-in-law at that time was in charge of the manhunt for that robbery. If they would have ever got those guys and got you, you might have been in Stillwater." So they didn't need air conditioning after that evening.
Okay, let me change the subject, but before I forget now, I want to speak to this young Joe here. I call you young Joe, you remember I tell you that all the time, and you thank me for that? But Albert, here's to Albert.
Yeah.
Every time young Joe would misbehave over at the homestead, Albert would say, "Well, that's the Aanestad in him." And we tried to explain to him, he really doesn't have a lot of Aanestad in
Well,
him.
one time, your mother was there. Dorothy said, "There's no Aanestad in here."
That's right, that's right. And then
Just think what you could have been if you'd had a little. Aanestad.
she wanted to buy those "I am not an Aanestad" pins from us, but we didn't have enough left over. But she wanted to wear those.
I still got a couple you can have.
Will you try to take them out?
So
They're in the
Mildred's
museum.
Let's take them
sister,
out of everybody's pockets.
Mildred's
They're in the
sister
museum, right?
is his grandmother,
Annette.
Annette.
Mildred's
Annette's in
sister.
college.
And it goes Goldie, then Mildred, then Annette,
Okay,
and then Maple, the one that
right.
didn't have any kids.
And was Fern the youngest?
No, Al was, wasn't
No,
No,
Albert
Fern.
was older than Fern.
Fern was the youngest.
Yeah. And your dad said in his write-up a number of years ago, and for these reunions, that we all knew that Albert wasn't quite right, but your dad said that he had apparently been kicked by a horse when he was younger.
My dad or Uncle Al?
No,
All right.
You know, remember he would always say he'd trade beats with guys.
Oh, God.
Oh,
But,
he
and you
had-
didn't dare get near him, or he'd pinch you so hard you could cry.
Oh.
Remember him taking the pipe and cutting off a cigar, sticking
Yeah.
it in the pipe, and then lighting the pipe? I remember one time I was up in his room doing something which I never was supposed to be in his room.
Oh my God, yes, how could you breathe?
And I moved something, and he came back, I don't remember what it was, and I remember I was just a little kid, and he just started yelling at me for moving something, as though, you know, it was the end of the world.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
just, he didn't touch anything of
No.
his.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you talk about
Oh, like
kids,
a
I
little
never
kid.
got that close to them.
Oh, no, you did good. Well, you learned by us, we all had no pinch mark.
During the war, that
Which
we
war
was
was this?
WW2, the big one.
W2.
That
Last one we won.
1820.
yeah, the last one. That your grandparents lived in the upper floor in the very back, and they could kind of lock it, but the bathroom was kind of joint, I think, up there. But there was a lot of parties up there, and I remember your dad was in the Navy. I'm not sure he was in the Pacific, wherever he was, he's gone. And anytime there was any letters from him, that was a big time to hear. And usually your grandpa's the one that read the letter about what he had to say. But and that house tilted down, so when you walked through that little apartment, and there was a bedroom, big kitchen, and a bathroom back there. But that baby, you could roll a ball very quick.
You didn't
going
dare
out the
drop
back
a marble,
door.
it's gone.
Now, who lived in
Interesting
the,
house.
Oh, it
who lived
was.
in the main house then, when Joe and, Pod's mom?
Well,
Owned the house.
Mildred was living downstairs for a while with Annette,
But that was after GovTech.
yeah. But then,
That would have been in mid-50s.
but
Yeah.
Albert, and little grandma was still living
Yeah, I think little grandma was.
Was she in the first one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And when I used to, I had the job that your dad had of going down to get things at the hardware store, but also sometimes taking Albert to the Nokomis theater and picking up snuff.
Yeah.
And the old girl was 80-something or other, she looked 100 and something, but, and your grandmother and my grandmother used to just love it to say, aren't you gonna give little grandma a kiss? And the old girl had snoots
That's
dripping out her
right,
mouth,
right.
so anything repulsive
I
to
did
a
yesterday.
fourth or fifth grade.
I've done that once.
And now you know why none of us chewed.
Yes, that's right. She was a great example.
It's a role model.
Yeah.
I never knew her. You know, and my mom and I lived there at 3924.
When we moved from wrestling.
Right. Well, we moved, we lived with Grandma and Gub over in St. Paul for a while.
I didn't know
First?
that.
You spent Sundays eating with us.
Probably, yeah.
And I remember Ole scared the hell out of you more than once just telling you to eat veggies, boy, you.
I lived, I was telling you, I lived
No-
in
and no milk with your
abject
meal.
fear.
Oh,
of
we all had to do
I
that.
really did.
We didn't.
And at
Yeah.
that
Oh,
time,
maybe we did.
that's when Fritz and
And
I
of course,
lived with
I was
Dorothy and
always
Joe
speaking
and
out.
Joe Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That couldn't have been a good deal.
I don't
You guys-
remember.
It was a good deal for us, but it couldn't have been a good deal for your old family. That was.
They never said anything negative about it.
But,
Never.
well, they were
Yeah,
just
dolls
terrific
that
about
they
it.
used to
They
stick
were
pins
just
in,
really
but that
terrific
doesn't
about it.
No, that was never, that was always a real positive thing that they talked about.
in fact, my impression of it was that they became great admirers of yours. I mean, seriously, they always showed respect and love for Joe, but they thought you and Michael, you know, that
They
you
thought
I'm the son of the
I
star.
became a great admirer of
No, they
Dorothy.
liked you too. I mean, they were always.
I had a crush on Dorothy like.
Of the two of us, I was their third favorite.
And it wasn't because you couldn't carry a tune either.
Well, and then Kathy and I'd go on field trials with Joe and Dorothy, and that endeared us to
Could you
them.
get the bird in your mouth?
It was good.
Dropping
back
into
then.
Joe's feet was a big problem.
Obedience trials.
Who of the two of you was the one that always told about the movies?
No, no, no.
Oh, no.
Oh, that's right, that was you.
Yeah.
Your mother and father
Mom and
thoroughly
They
enjoyed
talked about
that.
that
Oh,
over and
yeah.
over and over.
Mom and Podge never.
They told
had to
that
go to
story.
I
one.
learned to appreciate it, but at the time I didn't.
Well, you know
He'd
what,
come over
you
and tell
didn't
him
have to
the
see a
past.
movie, you
You
could
heard the
ask
story?
Jim. If Jim had seen it, you didn't have to see it, he could tell it to you.
But the only difference is the movie lasted an hour and a half, so you better go see that, because if Jim told it was 2 3/4 hours.
That's right. He came up with sex.
That was a
props.
detail guy.
Absolutely.
And
I
they
was
used,
just a couple of asides.
they used to like
And
to
that guy
keep
was
the
in
needle
another
going
movie.
by, they would ask question, well, what happened then? Well, you got an answer.
Dorothy would love to tell that story.
My wife talked to me just recently, she asked me, where did the sarcasm come in your life?
Oh, you blame us?
Just
That's
show
the
her
honest
this video. Show her this video.
So this is a
That's
group
the
under
honest
the
honest
buzzkill.
I think it's real genetic.
Yeah. Well, when he's talking about him, Christmas Eve as a kid, little kid, was always at 3924 Clinton, and I got Colette to write about her early remembrances, but somehow it never got onto the website. We're gonna have to take care of that. But she likened the idea of passing out Christmas gifts. She and Marshall did that to all the little kids. Then it moved over to our house for Christmas Eve, and you were 7, maybe 8 years old, and the place was elbow to armpit with cocktails being passed around. I thought that was a regular part of it.
And smoke in the air.
Yeah.
Oh.
And it wasn't cocktail, it was highballs.
Yeah.
Eyeballs.
And then they started opening up gifts, and by the time it got around to you, you opened up this restored double-barrel 20-gauge shot Elsie Smith.
Gee, how do you write that?
And you were ecstatic, and the other 7 of us are over there drooling. How come the kid got something like this, you know? And you're breaking it open and looking at it. Your mother had tears in her eyes. Your dad was grinning from ear to ear, and we were all looking like, what the hell happened here?
I beat my slippers all to hell.
What I remember about that also was that the shotgun was hidden underneath the couch that I was sitting on.
Oh.
Oh,
And I remember thinking to myself, I'm not gonna get the shotgun because I saw all the presents.
Yeah, you didn't see
Well,
it,
I
right?
didn't see it, and then someone said, look, right underneath the couch.
Okay,
Amazing.
I
help
still
me
have
with,
that gun, by the way.
help me with this, because there was one of those gatherings, maybe it was Christmas Eve, over at 3924. Marshall was in town, either on leave or he just got out of the Navy or whatever he was in, Colette's brother.
I don't think he's in the military.
Well, he was in, oh, maybe he was out of some
Out of jail.
organization. Anyway, he had this convertible, and he put us in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
convertible. We went from there, with the top down, over and drove by Roosevelt High School up and down 28th
It's
Avenue.
Christmas.
I think it was Christmas Eve, it had to be, because
Waving
everybody
to
was
people,
there.
they thought it was a break.
Huh? Well, it was late at night, but late at
But the
night.
Christmas that your folks, every year, the Christmas Eve, would always go until about 10:30 or so, when Glass and Martha would show up,
And-
every year.
And Colette and
sometimes
Russ,
later.
they
Yeah.
were late, but my
Right.
mother always had ham and potato salad, and Russell always said, got to go over there, that's a right to Christmas.
Well, there was a lot of people that came to your.
Yes,
house.
yeah.
I mean, it was always a place to go.
It-
It was not the biggest by any means, but it was a
But
place
no.
to be welcome.
But did everybody have to finish their meal before they could drink their milk? No
Oh, yeah,
matter who
well,
they
the
were?
younger ones, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the older ones didn't never
Bonnie
have
was
milk.
tough on them. That's why they ate so fast.
Oh, when you talk about little houses, when your dad died, I remember the deal of being passed around, or before that, and he said when he died, he did not want any of his big eulogies and spending any money on flowers. Buy a couple of cases and have some highballs, but he said, I'd like every 20 minutes, half an hour to somebody say, here's to Fritz and tell a story. And it was at your house,
Yeah.
which was a similar style house to my mother and dad's, and one of those shotgun craftsman houses. And that's what happened, and the funeral was like 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, and by 9 o'clock at night, they were into the second case of Fleischmann's and Four Roses. They
That's
really
right,
went
yeah.
first class.
Right.
And it was, but
Well,
it
if it
was,
wasn't for them, they wouldn't have been making it.
but it was a delightful number of stories that always came up, and by that time, they started repeating them.
Yeah, but nobody remembered it. Well, I talk about your dad a little bit. When he was in the service, and he was at Boston when they had that big fire, and he was a hero, getting people out of that bar fire. It was written up in the New York papers, and everybody kind of forgot about that, but he was a genuine
Well,
lifesaver of people out of a fire in Boston.
one of the biggest issues was, and still don't know the story, but he wasn't supposed to be there. He was not AWOL, but he was not at his assigned location. And so the name that appeared in the paper, and I thought it was the Boston paper, but it could be New York. It was, I thought it was.
I think it was the Boston, yeah, not New York, yeah.
And the name that appeared in the paper was not his, but Gov, I think, as I remember it, Mom said through his contacts in police departments, Gov found out that Joe had been there and was the hero that was mentioned. But the name that appears, I don't think is Joe King.
But he was.
But he was the hero. I've heard that story.
But was
years.
it,
I asked Joe last night, and he said he didn't talk much about it.
I think it was.
I can't remember.
Yeah, he didn't talk much about that at all. I
So-
wonder who he might have been with. Maybe he was with somebody that my mother
Didn't care for
didn't, or he shouldn't have been.
Well,
Were they, I don't think they were
They
married
weren't
then.
married.
No, they,
Yeah, but that doesn't make any difference, yeah.
Oh,
Your mother spent a lot of time at our house during the war, just occupying time. And it was a unique situation to come home from school and there'd be your mother and my mother making potato salad and doing these other things, and they spent hours there.
But she was so attractive, and I mean, she was just sort of, all of us were going.
Like 7 of us.
This is Dorothy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And she just.
Well, no,
Actually, she retained her beauty, by the way. I thought as a mature woman, she was just lovely all her life.
well, another part that is really interesting to me is the fond memories that some of you have about my grandpa.
Oh, man.
And-
Podge?
Yeah, but my grandpa in our family with my dad was not a fond memory.
Yeah.
And
Well, he was
always negative.
He was always mad at his dad for how his dad treated his mother.
Right.
And also because of the alcohol.
Right, which had to do
Which
with how they were.
caused it.
They lived in Kansas City for a while.
Yeah.
Well, they lived during during the war year when it was the Joe Louis and the Walcott fights and stuff, that my dad and Podge were good drinking buddies. And I'm not sure who enabled who, but they would, my mother and dad would go over and get your grandparents on Tuesday, and they would come over Tuesday and stay until the following Friday or Saturday fight, and then go home on like Monday. So they were there a full week. And one of my favorite stories was my job between the rounds of one of those Joe Louis fights.
Hold up the jib, put on a real flight.
Or your bikini.
Uniform.
That uniform you had when you were 3 or 4.
Is this when they dressed up like a little girl and hold the sign?
I will finish that. So we had, my job, my job during the break in the rounds was to collect all the long neck beer, go out and fill them up, come back and redo this, then there was 2 minutes between the, well, we had always had mutt dogs, and they always had an old pie tin, so I would just take the long necks out there and drain them into the pie tin. So at about the 11th, 12th round, something like that, one of those fights, the dog was getting this way and such, and the place was full. I think Holmbergs were occasionally there, and all listened on the radio. And
Oh, yeah. Big
so,
one.
Big, yes.
yeah, and so the dog comes in the room and puts one paw this way, one paw this way, and just did a slow nosedive into the rug, slow motion. And old Oni gets up and counts him out. And her grandfather was crying so hard, he pulled a handkerchief, and the old man never stopped. He's out of here! And then the old man picked up the dog, took him out, and got a towel and put him underneath the sink. And said, it wasn't the last rites, but the next morning the dog is going, the old man said, I know just what the problem is.
That's right.
And he got
They're all doing the
two
same thing.
aspirin, crushed it up, and when they really want to spoil the dog, they'd open up a can of dog food, not that cheap dry stuff, and mix up the 2 aspirin in that.
Oh,
And
that-
an hour or so later, the dog is out and saying, way to go.
Used to go over at the
I thought
bank going.
I thought he gave him a piece of the hair of the human that bit him.
Yeah, right.
But they,
I remember when Grandma and Gov would call your place and ask if your mom and dad were home, and you'd say no, and they said, well, where are they? And she would say, EDS's, of course.
your mother really liked that. She couldn't finish the whole thing without laughing.
What's that?
It's a beer joint about
Ed's.
Oh.
Little corner.
Oh.
bar.
They would spell it for the kids. They were going to EDS, and so they didn't know what they
It's
were.
like nobody could understand EDS.
And that's when they were in junior high.
Well, that was actually a block from where we were in the snake pit.
Yeah, when we lived
Just
along
down the
cleaners.
street.
Wasn't a block.
Probably not.
Right.
might have been
It was
4
between us and
stores.
the theater.
Some of the
No,
pictures.
no.
No,
Ed
Ed was
was
on
between us.
38.
It was
Between
on
us
one
and
side
the
of the
hardware
street.
store.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
but
There was a hardware store on
Yeah.
the corner. There was a drugstore on the corner where you live.
Thompson's
And
Drug.
across the street was Nile Hardware, run by my dad's second cousin.
Laney.
No, before that. It was, anyway, next door to that was the bar. But we were just like at the cleaners where you all live. Right behind the stores is a little alley, and there's the same thing behind the beer joint. So that's where we spent a lot of our time waiting for them and the beer
So,
joint.
so Ed's was on that side of 38, just up a little bit?
Yeah, same
Yeah,
side.
same side of the
Same
cleaners.
size as the
That's
drugstore.
clear, and just on that, oh.
Right.
And that was the Sportsman over by the theater?
Right.
By the theater.
Yeah.
Right next door.
Bill Dunphy used to.
Jody, what did you remember?
The quad.
Some of the pictures that I brought for you, Fritz must have been your father that took them down to the drugstore to have them developed. So on the envelope, it says Fritz, and for address, it just says Cleaners.
Yeah.
Oh.
So they should be in that box that I have.
Right,
Yeah.
Huh. Well, tell me a little bit about, now Sig was a police officer, correct?
Gov?
Gov?
Yeah.
Yeah, she said, I thought you meant.
He was head of the-
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Gov.
One of
No,
those-
he was a paramedic.
We find out a lot when these little get together.
Yeah. Were there
He was,
rumors, speculations of mafia things, or can't we talk about that?
Well, yeah, no.
Well, there's one picture that I just gave you.
Yeah,
he is sitting in a group of probably 20-some, and I swear to God,
Italian
there
generals.
isn't one in that whole group that doesn't look like he's died. It's just, they all look deep Italian and look like they're mafia.
And do you have the
Right,
So I
headline?
think,
When I was born, my mother got a dozen roses from Kid Can. Now that, you know,
I'll
that,
tell you a little.
but that was partly of the deal because she
He
worked
was-
at the, one of the mafia-run
Nightclubs.
nightclubs. What's the name of that one that gave you that? Augie's.
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 Yeah.
Oh,
Augie's.
right, Augie's, oh,
Yeah,
yeah, and there's
yeah.
a big book about that now.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
She was also a-
Augie's Secrets.
She
Yeah.
was also a radio singer on the first, was what now became WDGY.
Augie was?
No, no, Reedy was. But your great-grandfather, Sig, also became, or was known for the headline that said he was the one-man moral squad.
Well, and he was.
He was actually,
Yeah.
he was actually involved in starting it. But I
And
don't-
he was the head of detectives
Oh,
Yeah.
at one time.
And
When
he
you
was
mentioned
also-
this thing about the
Oops.
Kid Ken, it's Blumenfeld is the last
Isidore.
name.
Yeah.
And ratchet forward to like the 60s, Bobby Kennedy was investigating key people involved in the rackets, and he had Joe Namath tied up with rackets people in a bar in Miami called Bachelor's 3. But what Bobby Kennedy accused Joe Namath of is cavorting with Blumenfeld's son, Kid Can's son.
No, down in Florida.
Well, the liquor store that I worked in for a year and a half in downtown Minneapolis was owned privately by Kid Can. I'm glad he never found out who I was as a stock boy, and I wound up delivering booze after that. But he would come in there periodically, and in theory he had two sisters that ran it. But it was a cute, they adopted me, and I was one of two non-Jewish folks in the whole place. It was
You're a
delightful.
goyim.
Hmm?
You're a goyim.
Boy. And didn't Blumenfeld make his money from the streetcar?
yeah, somebody did, but
Mhm.
it was.
Well,
big
he and-
stores,
Was it Lowry that burned them so that they couldn't
Couldn't read
redo them because they were pushing for the buses?
the buses, okay.
That must have been a quasi-legal one, because the books we read, it was, he had prostitution, gambling, and multiple liquor license, because in Minneapolis, or maybe the state, you're only allowed to have one liquor license per family. But in the Blumenfeld family, there were sometimes 2-year-old kids that had a liquor
yeah.
license.
Oh, jeez.
Well, Gov, as we called.
Right.
Wes, told me one time that you couldn't tell the difference between a cop and a crook.
Mm, yeah. That was the
They were,
gangster era.
they were close together.
Yeah.
Well, if you read that book, Augie's Secrets, you know why.
Yeah.
There was a lot of them at that time on the tape.
Well, and St. Paul was even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were open about it.
Yeah.
Well, and they lived in, Sig and Mill lived in a building that was known for holding mafia guys
Dillon's.
In fact,
In
yeah,
Salem.
Dillinger lived there
Yeah,
once.
huh?
91st and Lexington,
Lexington.
there were 3 units in that building that were owned by, quote, the Chicago crowd, better known as Al Capone's Murder Incorporated. And when Mike and I would spend a weekend, and then you and Sig would spend a couple of days when you're, and that Grandma would explain to us, and so did Grandpa, that where these 3 were, and there was a shootout over there with this Machine Gun Kelly or something, and they took us on a little tour. It's a big apartment building, and the bricks outside one of these apartments were all nicked up with bullet holes. So when we were like 8, 9 years old or something, and they showed us where Gov's guns were. Opened up, no bullets, and they got admonished. There's no bullets, you guys keep your hands off, these are not toys. And we said, wait a minute, you know where the bad guys are, where the apartments are, there's the gun, you got the bullets. Why doesn't our hero grandfather put bullets in the gun and go arrest the bad guys and send them back to Chicago?
I never thought that deep. What I remember was the first time I knew what a Murphy bed was.
Yeah.
Remember?
Oh,
It
yeah.
slides out of the closet, comes down like this.
They're real
Whoa.
popular now
Out
again.
of the
And
wall,
then-
out of the wall.
No, not the wall, it was a closet.
The closet was behind it.
Now they come out of the wall.
Yeah.
It came out of a closet, kind of like
Yeah.
this, and then came down.
All right, because we
And
used to
then- and
sleep
then-
on that bed. I
Well,
always-
we could, I found out a way to put the kids on there and put them back in.
Probably.
You didn't know for 3 days,
Sure.
huh?
I slept on my head.
Gov was also, and there's pictures probably that you have of a motorcycle lineup in front of the Minneapolis courthouse.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Gov was also on the first motorcycle patrol in Minneapolis.
And I think Jeff was a motorcycle officer too.
Did they either one ever ride horses for the police?
I don't believe so. I mean, I never heard.
And Jeff is Sig's brother,
Right.
Uncle Jeff, my godfather.
Okay.
Jefferson.
Jefferson, yeah.
Jefferson Martin Barton Couch.
He
That's
was,
a nice nickname. Have nicknames for
When we
everyone.
went down, when the four of us went down to, you were good enough to remember that with about the, we were walking across the street, we all had the same shirts on, it was Sig and me and Jim
Jim
and
and
Mike.
Mike, yeah.
We were walking across the street and some guy came to us.
That was a little lady.
The little lady said, "Are those four boys triplets?" That's a true happy man.
And by the way, none of you looked at all like one another.
There was a shirt, but we
The
were
shirts
dressed
were,
so
yeah,
different,
they were dressed.
oh, you remember
Clothes
that same trip when we got to Seabury, every get-together they had, it was senior citizens and, man, I don't think there was anybody under 65 there at that time, but, the one time we were notified that we were going over to meet Aunt something or other, Couch on, quote, the other side of town. And, we just
And who
went
was
to
the
do what we were
little
told.
girl? What was it?
Oh, no, you're thinking of Betty Bean.
Betty Bean.
Betty
yeah,
Bean,
yeah.
I found a picture of her, but she was a white girl. I'm talking about,
Yeah.
so we go across,
We can edit
Town.
this, correct?
Keep moving, keep
we
moving.
go across
You can
town,
do it.
and we go into this, and it's 100% black. And this Aunt something or other is about 280 pounds, and we were supposed to do what we were told, so we were all supposed to go up and give this gal a hug, and we were kind of halfway lined up, and we're looking around and say, what in the hell's going on here, you know? And all the adults are just laughing from ear to ear, and after we got done with this welcome, their kids, and they must have had 15 of them around there, cousins or black kids. They took us out in the barn, and we had the best time on that 2-week trip, whatever it was,
Well,
playing with those kids and the black kids.
Wasn't-
Ratchet forward, I run into a gal at the Census Bureau there, in the main office, like something or other Couch, and I asked her where she's from, and she's about 100 miles south of here, and I said, any place near Seabury? Yeah, well, that's where we're from. And I said, well, my grandfather's from there, his name is Sig Couch, and I said, I bet we're related. And then I turned around and walked away. Well, the director of the office came on, where I was working, said, damn, you interrupted things around here. Excuse me.
well, the family that we went to was the gal that raised Sig and Jeff. Well, she was the gal that was the
Like a nanny or something?
yeah, like was close to that.
It had the same last name.
Well, but one time sometime my mother told the story about when she was little and went back there, and they wanted her to kiss this gal that had raised it, and she said, my mom don't allow me to kiss niggers. And it never happened at all, you know.
That's right.
And this is a family that she's just insulted.
Yeah.
So.
Huh.
And I swear that my mother told me that she was wet nursed by the woman that raised.
Now, which mother
One
was
of
that?
Yeah.
You gotta differentiate here.
Reedy said that
There might be another
she
drink,
was
but-
wet nursed as a baby when Mildred and Sig visited Kentucky.
I think we
And-
might want to know before or after the adoption. I think
It was before.
That's why mother got hooked on chocolate milk.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going in a weird direction now. Let's-
Take a break real quick.
Okay.
Camera just shut
This
off.
is
We'll
it.
take-
When we got home, how'd you guys, you know, I remember my mother saying, well, how'd it go in town? Both of them said, fine.
Wow. He was a man's man.
So we're back.
And
I don't
your-
think I ever met it.
Your mom's brother was a cop too, wasn't he?
No, it was, he worked for the same company.
Oh, I thought he was a cop.
How about that? Reminds me of the time when we sang the songs down at the Mayflower Coffee Shop.
Taste
The
the
four
sweet.
midgets, but they're gonna sound like something tonight. That guy was weird. He was weird.
Oh.
When you guys made the recording?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was bad news.
Well, Jim was a
I've heard
couple
that.
beats behind us every,
Oh.
at the end of each
He
line.
was more than- I was more
When
than
did you do
bad.
that?
when your dad was managing the Mayflower shop.
Donut shop.
Coffee shop, or donut shop, yeah.
And they had a guy that had a recording device, which is probably the first one that was ever around.
That was probably a crank.
It was candle powered.
So you guys sang something?
The four of us, yeah.
What
We
was
sang,
You three,
in a
who else?
sleepy town of San Juan, the Serenade of the Bells.
Do you remember?
We sang that.
Did you
Mike, I
ever
remember.
tape record it?
He still plays it once in a while.
Michael still sings that in his show.
He made records of it.
We made records.
Yeah, we sent him around the country. Never got any calls.
A lot of
What,
sympathy.
the four
was
midgets,
there.
Because
Call it the
yeah, the
four-
four midgets, but they're gonna sound
They're on a
like
brass
something.
disc that turns real slow.
But that's when we say,
The four
and the
midgets.
serenade of the bells, bells. He came in like,
Well, we hadn't had time to rehearse.
no, we didn't know we were gonna do it all.
Speaking of singing,
Who's recording today? The song that you guys are doing?
Oh,
Is this recording now? It's not recording now.
What was
Yeah.
It is.
what
Oh,
was
it
your
is.
best, what was your
the
best
the
one?
Bobby,
No, the memory, my first memory of Bobby was that as a little, not very impressive, but as a little boy and younger than I, he had learned the words to Dear Hearts and Gentle People. And of course, Bonnie was very proud of him. So I came in the house and said, listen, he can sing, and I'm 5 years old. And you should sing it. And so he'd sing it, and then he'd sing it again, and everybody had to hear Bobby sing this song that he memorized at 4 years old.
Well, actually, on the fourth try, she finally got a song she could be proud of, isn't that what you said? That's why she was so proud. We can stop having kids now.
She got one she liked.
Yeah, right.
So the way Bobby learned how to swim is my parents used to take us up to Molten Lake up by Aiken. And it was a strip of 4 or 5 cabins. That was all there was on the whole lake. And I would say halfway across the lake they had this swim platform. And so Bob and I would take the boat and row out there. And I would jump off and he would just kind of sit up on top of the deal. And he'd go, why don't you teach me how to swim? I said, no problem. And he's, kind of doing the dog paddle and going back and forth, and finally he came back over to the deal. And for all the years we spent together, I don't think I ever heard him swear like that. And he said, and I said, well, think about it. We just swam back in the dock. He goes,
He was easily impressed.
saved his life.
right.
I remember him always, out of all of you guys, not myself included, as being the nice one.
when you excluded yourself, I knew where this was going.
I really did though.
Well, we did too.
He was always, he had a great sense of humor,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
was fun, and he was poking, but he was never malicious like we are.
And he never needed to be out front or
Yeah.
ahead or first. He was content to be
Yeah,
just a nice.
it's amazing.
I can see
He
him
lived
now.
in the situation he grew up in.
Yeah,
So
the
that's
environment.
nice.
He finally said, I'm going to be different.
I can see him now. We were in Wisconsin at some friends of ours, the Levezos, that owned a fairly big farm, and they did dairy and corn. And so we were caught one time alongside the barn. They had this pen, and we were riding 2 small calves. And, oh my God! The owner, Ralph Levezo, came out, and he yelled at us. And all Bob could say is, don't tell Dad, don't tell Dad.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, all right.
So he was also the smartest.
If you ever even come close to doing this again, I'm gonna tell your dad. Okay, it's a deal, it's a deal.
Your dad could hit an ear with his finger from 6 feet.
Oh.
He'd go, whack, yeet.
And
I
you
know, he
feel
used
it
to
for
pull
6
my
feet.
ear.
Yeah.
My folks never really touched me. I don't think I ever even got a spanking.
Really?
That explains a lot.
But Ole made up for it.
Yeah.
Okay. I believed until I was married and living in California, when Bonnie and Ole visited us and were marvelous guests. We enjoyed their stay. They came to see our firstborn. But I believed that Ole hated me. I literally.
A lot of people did that.
I didn't recognize that in everyone else. But I kept thinking, why, Bonnie's nice to me, and Bonnie likes me. Why did he hate me? One of the reasons may have been that I was more vocal than he wanted young people to be.
I'm
Well,
not sure he hated you, I
those-
just wanna keep you in line.
He just, well, I know, but no, my take on it, I'm sure he didn't hate me either.
Those
think they
fancy
like it.
Sunday dinners, John, when my mother used to pride herself, because each one of us got a T-bone steak, and there was mashed potatoes and all this sort of thing. And once you got a T-bone, you had to take mashed potatoes and veggies and stuff, and partway through this, or three-quarters of it, the old man said, well, anybody want some more? And he starts to pass the mashed potatoes around, and you announce, yeah, I'd like some more meat. And he leaped up and said, not until you eat your potatoes and veggies. And you cowed the corner, and by the time you ate your mashed potatoes and veggies, you weren't hungry.
Yeah.
Certainly weren't gonna say anything more.
Speaking of that dining room table, we had a get-together on Thanksgiving. It was Sig and his whole family, and I'm not sure if you guys were probably there, maybe even moved out of town by that time. And Mike Aanestad, who's now 6'6" and more than, anyway, he was just a little tight, and I was sitting next to him. So he says, Uncle Jody, can I have some corn? I said, well, what do you say? He said, peas. So I took a big scoop of peas and put them on his plate. He goes, and I just started eating. I didn't look at him, and all of a sudden he goes, Uncle Jody, can I have some corn? I said, well, sure. What do you say, Mike? Peas? Another scoop of peas. Oh, this happened. Three part of this attitude. This happened 3 times, and all of a sudden Joyce looked at me and said, that's enough. I don't think he likes peas anymore. So when you see him later today, ask him about
Good
peas
idea.
and corns and see if it reminds him of anything.
Well, we always kind of envied that the Edmunds boys always moved around a lot, and we were always just same place in South Minneapolis. And you were Crookston.
Got a lot of new friends.
And what-
Why are we moving at night, Dad?
well, then you lived
Every
in-
time the sheriff found out.
What was it, like Buckingham Hotel or
Oh, the
something?
Buckingham Palace.
And we were,
Yeah, I was in Buckingham downtown.
yeah.
That's where I had scarlet fever.
He did. He had scarlet fever.
And it was delightful because we would run out in the hallways and we were doing everything, but we didn't ask any questions about why somebody lived in the hotel for a while, but it was only a month or
So
two.
and I remember the Buckingham had these transoms above the door, and you can go down the hall and climb up and boost it, and you can look at other people's apartments or their hotel rooms.
You had to stand on the doorknob.
Yeah, you had to.
Was that where you lived when Mom sent you to school?
I went to school,
Yes.
yeah.
But,
That was one of 13 schools I went to.
No,
but the day that you
No,
sent
we were
Mom
on
to school-
Elliott.
Oh, no, I
She
lived
said-
on the Elliott.
Yeah.
I
she
walked
sent him across the park.
Well, when
in
you
the
lived on,
storm, and there was no school that day.
Yeah.
And then
She sent her to school on Labor Day.
Yeah.
I remember that there was a large boarded dump or something,
Tire dump.
Tired.
But there was rats back there, and that
Oh,
was
yes,
always
there
a
were.
place to go. So the 4 of us would run back there and see if we could throw and scare up some of these rats. And you told me later that your dad used to shoot at them or
No,
something.
no, the Larrabees who lived down below us were bow and arrow hunters.
Ah,
And
Oh,
they would,
that's what it was.
the rats would come near near dusk, and tip the garbage cans over out and try to get it. Well, they would shoot the rats, and it would pin them right against the garage. They'd be big rats tipping over a can, and they came from the tire dump that was between us and the school. It was a real interesting town.
Nice place.
Or the hospital there.
well, that's where Arlette went to,
Yeah.
because she lived right next to the hospital, probably 200 yards from where you lived.
Northwestern, or?
Abbott.
That's
In
where-
Northwestern Hospital, yeah,
Yeah.
which became Abbott.
But even visiting you, I think it was Rice Lake, where you lived at that T intersection.
Right.
Right.
And it was a deal of, we were supposed to entertain ourselves, and we were playing a football thing of kicking, passing, all this sort of thing, curb to curb.
Right.
And we'd go till, we could do anything we wanted to, but we were told what to eat at breakfast and keep quiet. Because they didn't want to get up until.
Oh, sure.
And I think it was the Elks Club that was the popular.
There was always a club.
Yeah.
Eagles or Elks, one,
Yeah.
Yeah.
all 3 of them probably.
Well, I very much appreciate you guys doing this, and we can wrap it up if you want.
Is there anything
We're
that you
about
want us-
halfway done.
Did
there
you find
anything you-
anything you can keep?
Is there anything you wanted us to say we didn't say?
I don't think so.
Well, one of the anecdotes I
What
forgot
Talk
to
about
tell.
Sig. We talked about
We
Bobby.
didn't, no, we didn't.
We didn't talk much about Sig.
Let's talk a little bit about Sig.
Sure.
I think that's kind of important, so you know, that's more than any other activity.
Well, being 2 years older, we used to fight pretty regular as washing dishes, and we'd yell and holler at each other, and the old man would say, yell once, and then the next thing you know, he'd have us both by our hair like a couple of cymbals, and you know, you never knocked us out, big boy, you see stars. Now that I have your attention, boys, I told you to keep quiet and just do the dishes. You know, I had lumps in my head for a while.
You know, I worked for Sig part-time with his father-in-law's sign business. But Sig, he wanted me to go up the ladder. I couldn't go up the ladder, so anytime he did sign on the ground, I'd help him with the signs that we put on the ground instead of putting them up. But Kathy and I used to go to Sig in Joyce's apartment just after we were married and play cards and stuff like that. First Avenue or Stevens, First Avenue in those brick buildings.
Gotta go around this way.
Yeah, I'm married.
Well, he was in
How
the,
excited you were trouble.
you're on TV
Right.
now.
Oh, you're in the family.
Right.
So he had gone in the Navy and the corpsman, and he kind of came back as in third class and went on active duty. So one of those sweetheart deals, he spent like 8 years at the airport, Will Chamberlain there with the Navy, and had a great gig.
Well, you went down to Texas for school, didn't you, for like?
Yeah, corpsman school or
So and
something.
you came back with a southern accent.
Yeah,
He did take long, yeah.
3 months
But
ago.
I think it was shortly after that when Oscar was his father-in-law.
Right.
Wanted to get out of that business, I guess, and that's when Sig told. And that would have been a great deal if he would have allowed Joyce to take care of the financial part of it. But Sig was in the Shriners at that time and was very eager to be a good buddy to everybody, and always settled for less than the bill.
Right.
Or he'd acquire a beat-up used car as payment for some sign, and
He had a lot of different jobs, interesting kinds of things.
But my mother remembers fondly when she lived in the apartments out in Richfield, not far from, just north of 494. Sig would drive the ambulance, and he frequently would stop by and say hello, just to say hello to Aunt Reen, you know. And he'd get out of the ambulance, of course the ambulance probably left the lights on, I don't know. But he'd go in and say,
So he could bark.
Yeah.
But that's the
When you-
apartments that, when Maureen moved in there, she asked, does the liquor store deliver here? And then she said, yeah, they said, okay, then I'll move in.
Also the apartment where you scared that lady never came out of her apartment
That's right,
again.
that's right.
when you mentioned ambulance, they had a little part-time gig of the whole, Sig would put the whole family, including, and they would drive down to Indiana, and they would pick up 5 ambulances, and the whole family then would each one drive one back, and they delivered to various cities or something. They did a quite nice thing for 2 or 3 days. Well, one of those was just before Christmas Eve, and so Sig drove one of these ambulances out to the house, and it's one of those that are generic, so you turn different dials to say what siren you wanted, the French screamer or the
Oh,
British one or this. So the guy over here in the orange shirt said, "Hey, can I drive one?" "Oh yes." I said, "Yeah, go ahead." So Jody's going to quote drive around the block. Well, he got down at the other end of the block and turned on the French siren, which was kind of quite unusual. Drove slowly around 15, 20 miles an hour, and as he drive up, what is it, 19th Avenue, lights are coming on all over the place. He stops in front of Paul's house on the corner, which might be 200 yards away from our house. Stopped this, shut it off, and said, "Somebody here order a cab?" Shut it all off and came back home, and Sig by that time was going a little nuts.
This is supposed to be a conversation about Sig.
I couldn't resist that. He brought the amp.
And how he led us astray.
Right.
He did a lot with motorcycles too.
But Jim was right,
He
though.
had a nice business motorcycle escort.
Escorting and stuff like that, right?
And that
You were right about his generosity, though, because when I got out of the service, he had the sign business all by himself, and he asked me if I'd help him, and I said, well, sure, I haven't not back to work yet. So I worked for him, you know, that's when the big flood hit. No, a tornado, I'm sorry, up in Fridley went through.
Oh.
And we spent 2 solid weeks helping anybody that needed help. We had a big truck with a crane on it, and we were pulling trees off of cars and whatever anybody wanted. And I kept saying, "Say, can we talk about paycheck?" He goes, what do you know about volunteer?" I said, "All right, now I'm feeling better."
Well, when he died, and we were talking to the mortician, he was saying that he always had a problem getting a reliable motorcycle escort, because they would say they're gonna be there, and then if they got a better gig or something else, they'd just not show up. And for like a 10-year period, Sig and Mike did that sort of thing, but he said if Sig said that he was gonna be there, he would be there and never disappointed him or never bailed on it. So there were some ethics, but they kind of got given.
Also, after his son Ronnie died, he became very active in helping other families. And a good friend of mine, Don McGill, Don and Judy, they lost a son in a motorcycle accident, and Don got up and spoke at Sig's funeral, if you remember. He's the one who said, "We would have never, ever got through it if it wasn't for Sig."
Yeah.
That's
What a note to end on, huh?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it was one in the end.
Yeah.
Well, I do appreciate it, guys. It's great. Just gotta tell the stories.
We appreciate
Pass
all
them
you've
on.
done in the
Oh,
books
thanks so
and
much.
everything. That was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Great.
And how much do we have to pay you not to publish this? Is that what this is about?
Could be.
Right. It's a blackmail game.
No one here
Just give me the
is.
edit.
Remember when you were living on
Thank you.
38th Street there, and we climbed, in the wintertime, we climbed up on the roof of that.
School?
I walk in
No,
front of
the
my-
cleaner.
On the cleaners.
And it was a deal of water balloons, a little bit bigger than a softball, and we'd lob them out on the intersection, and the idea was if you could hit a windshield, it hit and instant ice. And nobody knew where they were coming from. These
Yeah.
water balloons would appear, and by the time people get pissed off, and we'd sit there kind of watch and peek, and all 4 of us were up there.
Well, and we
We're
were
still taping.
Are we still taping? Turn it off. Not,
The
yeah.
roof above
He
it.
says, "Turn it off,
Is
Mike's got a good
that what
story."
you're on?
Right above
This
the
is the best
cleaner.
part.
Right above the cleaners, okay, because the roof at Ed's always had the ladder down where we could reach it, so we'd get up.
Different building.
Yes, it was
Remember when we
across
used
the
to
street over
sneak
there.
out when they were playing poker? We'd
Yeah.
sneak out from the upstairs and climb down the
40-15,
roof.
yeah.
40-15.
Yeah, right, and we'd go up to the corner of Cedar and 42nd. But at the bottom of the hill in the winter, we'd stop a streetcar and we had ice in the,
Well, the other
and
thing
then
was,
you'd keep trolley.
Dad used to do that too,
Yeah.
only with grease.
well, then we could sneak back, crawl up the drain pipe and everything, else, go back into the roof. They didn't know, but we used to listen. There was just an air vent, not a heating
Yeah,
thing.
just a hole for the vent over it.
And so your parents and our parents and usually grandparents were down there telling dirty stories and everything. And here's 4 of us over there listening to this vent about what was really going
We
on.
stole Joe's story.
Oh, pardon me.
Oh, just similar thing.
Yeah,
It wasn't luxury living, but who was saying at that stage?
Who knew the difference?
They had fun.
Well,
Think of the difference in our lives versus their lives. How much more expansion there is about the world.
Right, right.
I know my dad never traveled after he got back home from the war. He had no desire to go anywhere. Mom did, but he told me often, he said, "I've seen too much of the world
Oh, yeah.
to want to go anywhere
Have the
else."
kind of stuff that is.
But their world was so much different than our world.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm looking at the ones now. I 2-year-old grandchild who's doing this.
Yeah.
I do it, can't stop.